Good afternoon and welcome to the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners meeting. We're going to be talking about the Land Development Code text amendments this afternoon. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Joe Moretta.
Thank you, Commissioner Kemp.
Madam Chair,
yes, I'm sorry. I'll do a roll call. We'll have a roll call.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Kemp?
Here.
Cullen?
Here.
Hagan?
Here.
Myers?
Here.
Overman?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
White?
Here.
All right, thank you.
And before you begin again, Mr. Moretta, it's a little bit low volume for me. If there's, again, if we can get a little more volume, I don't know if others have that issue, but.
Mr. Moretta, can you hear us still? It looks like your connection may have timed out. It looks like Mr. Moretta may be having some bandwidth issues.
Just when we thought we were getting good at this.
Mr. Moretta, if you can't hear us, you can try turning off your camera. That will often help clean up the audio a little bit.
Mr. Gormley, maybe we could go out.
Yes.
Out of order here.
Yeah. So Commissioners, this is the workshop on the round 2 Land Development Code amendments. Following today's, we're going to introduce the amendments that we have included in this round and take any questions or input that the board may have. Following today's workshop, we'll be having a public outreach meeting on September 14th. And we'll have a first public hearing on September 30th and an adoption public hearing scheduled for October 21st. We do have 4 amendments to present today and a 5th that is that is still in progress. That amendment, and we'll get a little more detail on it, is in response to a recent change in state law regarding home-based businesses and basically a preemption action that resulted from that. So for that amendment, we are conforming our regulations so they're clear for the public and users of what we can and can't and do and don't regulate in terms of home-based businesses. With that, I will ask Tom Hisney to introduce the first item, which is regarding alcoholic beverage package sales by restaurants.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This amendment, the purpose of this amendment is to reflect recently adopted state law regarding package sale of alcoholic beverages by certain eating establishments. Our wet zoning categories at present, which are described in section 611 of the code.
Mr. Hisney, just so you know, your presentation isn't being shared. It looks like it was stopped sharing.
This is Israel Monsanto Development Services. I will start the presentation so Mr. Hisney can speak to it. Give me 1 second. Let me know if I need to switch the screen.
Yes, you need to switch. Perfect.
So in section 61111 of the code, we presently have a number of wet zoning categories, a number of which, several of which do not allow package sales. So to reflect the requirements of state law, where to those categories that do not allow package sales, we are proposing language which reflects the state law, which is that eating establishments which have 2,500 square feet of service area is equipped to serve meals to 150 persons at one time, and derive 50% of its gross food and beverage revenue from the sale of food and non-alcoholic beverages, may sell or deliver alcoholic beverages in a sealed container in accordance with the requirements of the state law and if authorized under its state alcoholic beverage license. So in these categories that historically have not permitted package sales, this amendment will allow package sales under the criteria that's found in state law.
And that concludes your presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I don't see any comments or questions by commissioners, so we can move on to the next one. Mr. Moretta, I guess, or Mr. Gormley?
Sorry, Mr. Monsanto will present the next amendment. Thank you.
Israel Monsanto Development Services, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You do have to switch the presentation.
Do you see the next slide? 21.
You're seeing the other.
The former slides.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
We're still actually seeing the
All right, just swapped. I'm swapping them right now as we speak.
Yes, unfortunately, we're still seeing the presenter view, even when it's swapped.
Okay, I'll try it again.
Now it's good, sir.
Good. The next text amendment is 21-1045. This text amendment updates sections of the Land Development Code pertaining to requirements specifying garbage and recycling infrastructure needed to ensure adequate service of levels for new construction of commercial and multifamily development. This new text amendment will require new commercial and multifamily development to provide adequate space for garbage and recycling dumpsters. This will ensure compliance with Florida Statute 403-706. This will also further sustainable materials management goals. This text amendment language will also implement the solid waste element of the comprehensive plan that is currently underway, CPA 2111, and this will be consistent with policies 1.14 and 1.15. And also, the purpose of this amendment is to reduce litter and improve community appearance. And that concludes the presentation for this item.
And I don't see any questions by commissioners. Is this something that the legislature just passed, or is this formally part of state statute?
Commissioner, I believe that this was a state statute that has been on the books for a few years.
Okay.
And this provision was recently incorporated into the update of the comprehensive plan, which has driven this Land Development Code amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, so we
I
can
have
move to.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Recently I went to the Florida Association of Counties, and there was a lot of new technology that was providing for a closed environment for a dumpster technology type of thing that would eliminate, rodents and rats and raccoons and everything else from getting into it. But it was also needed space, and it was similar to a compactor, but not. Does the dimensions within this land code preclude a technology like that, or would it be wise to get you at least an example of that is a newer level of recycled and garbage container technology? Because I would hate to have to go back and to it and change it, because we got better at compacting our trash. So
Commissioner, we could certainly follow up on that. We did work with the solid waste department to get the specs that we have in here. To that point, though, it's a good point that we'll make sure that the dimensions that are in here are able to accommodate current and evolving ways of handling waste and recycling
And the reason I asked, I looked at the illustration we have on the presentation, and what I saw there was significantly smaller than that, and that's exactly what we don't want to see. So I was,
Right.
granted, it's probably a little ways away in terms of affordability in a lot of communities, but I would hate to preclude it because we have these dimensions in the code. So I was just wanting to bring that to your attention as we move forward in language to be approved at a later date.
Yeah, so the size of the enclosures and space now is oriented towards traditional dumpster type facilities. So if something smaller would certainly fit within that, but we'll confer and make sure that is, there's not something that we could add here to accommodate that we do not have right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you, because it did seem to be more in a multifamily arrangement, which we talked specifically about, multifamily developments, and I'd hate to only be stuck with what we are seeing on the screen right now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the next item.
Commissioners, the next item is LDC 21-1046. This is an establishment of a time limit for reopened or remanded public hearing applications. This amendment will add a 6 months time frame limit for an application to be heard at a public hearing after it has been reopened or remanded for further public hearing. Per current regulations, the hearing timeframe deadline does not apply to any application for which the public hearing was conducted but then was subsequently reopened or remanded. This amendment will require the 6 months maximum time frame for these applications, and the calculation of time for the 6 months deadline for a reopened or remanded case would start from the newly scheduled or remanded hearing date for that specific application. And this concludes this presentation.
And Commissioner Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Gormley, I've spoken to you and your staff sometime about an item I'm aware of where the owner of the property seems to be using a loophole here to continue violating our code by continually delaying coming in for the rezoning hearing. Would this close that loophole?
Commissioner, yes, this is that what you describe is an illustration of the challenge that we saw with our current timing of hearings, which requires that an application go to hearing within 6 months of the original scheduled hearing, or else it's withdrawn. What it doesn't currently account for, and what this amendment will account for, is an application that goes to the board, is heard, goes to the board, and then is remanded back to the zoning hearing master. There's currently no time frame associated with how long that application can stay without being heard by the zoning hearing master. So yes, this amendment is intended to establish a time frame so we don't have a scenario where an application can go on indefinitely in a remand status. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioners. I am aware of people using this loophole to just continue violating our land development code by claiming to be in the rezoning process and have this process pending and dragging their feet and continuing on for years with otherwise, something that's otherwise would be shut down. So it's kind of a trick, and I hope we can pass this to close that loophole. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Overman, your hand is up, but I think from last time still.
My apologies.
So I don't see anyone else on this, so we could move to the next one.
The next item.
Israel?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, go right ahead. Israel will introduce this item as well.
Just the next item is 21-1047. This is the review criteria for transportation items during plan development rezoning applications. The purpose is to clarify the review process of some regulations in the Land Development Code for connectivity, cross-access, access points, and other transportation-related review criteria, and this is as part of PD rezoning process. This will require that applicable access management standards be shown on PD plans. The amendment will clarify that if development seeks relief from transportation requirements and standards found in section 604 during the PD reviews, this will be approved after the board approves PD rezonings, and this is consistent with current PD review practice. If flexibility is needed on PD plans, these standards will be reviewed and applied outside development permitting and must be in compliance with all applicable code requirements from the section 60400. Other items have been included also to the list of transportation information required in all plan developments, whose requirements must also be followed within approved PDs as currently practiced.
And
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah, and that concludes my part.
And Commissioners, this amendment is intended to build on the amendment that the board passed late last year regarding required information on PD plans for transportation, requiring continuation of road stub outs and providing for road stub outs, and clarifies that in terms of access management, that if an applicant wants to propose some deviation from our access management standards, that in addition to providing it on the plan development, they have to provide they go through the exercise and meet the criteria of an administrative variance review. And of course, those things are presented to the board and PDs, not in approved format, but with a recommendation after the project gets a board approval or not. So this really is building on that last on the previous amendment, and is dealing with a few more items, particularly focused on access management and things like throat depths for driveways.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman.
Yes, and my question relates to, we've looked at our process numerous times to try and figure out how to get a better outcome. And I remember there was a change in our process to make sure that when the developer or builder was coming through in the initial planning stage, they met with staff early on to review how the project would sit, what it was looking like, what the requirements would be given its surrounding areas, and then sort of just as an overall planning meeting to offer the organization some level of success. Is this application here give that same goal? I mean, does this land development code criteria set that issue up for that review meeting? Or is it possible that that's included in the review meeting to see if it were to meet the requirements according to access management guidelines or standards?
Yes, I would say that the intent of this is to facilitate that pre-submittal, or we're moving to a post-application meeting process. And what it's clarifying is that it's not just the road network and connection points that are being looked at and considered up front, but also some of the aspects of the designs of those access, driveway locations and width. So it's bringing that issue explicitly up front and part of the plan development process, which will get both applicants thinking about and presenting, and staff looking for a bit more detailed items up front in the PD zoning process. That is our intent with this amendment.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify. And then the second follow-up question is, we recently learned about Mufasas. And so, whatever that is, I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think it's a great, it's a great acronym for the idea of identifying how, a developer could maybe more efficiently create access or cross access or road infrastructure that we need. And then we've had a previous conversation about how in the development of a project, such as a PD, where it's large scale typically, and we need that cross access, identifying whether or not the developer develops the road and whether it becomes a county asset versus staying in the community under maybe a CDD or some other structure. Would that be part of this review as well?
So Commissioners, a MUFASA, as I started coining it, Mobility Fee Alternative Satisfaction Agreement. So that would be something in addition to I'd say in addition to what we would be requiring for planned development. So the MUFASA is a project needs to follow all the rules, meet our criteria, provide for transportation design and construction that meets our regulations and accommodates the impacts of the project, the operational impacts of the project. MUFASA would be something that would be over and above that, where a developer would step up and would offer to build something that would otherwise be on the county's CIP and apply their mobility fees to that. So nothing in here precludes that. Also, nothing in here necessitates that MUFASA concept be part of a PD application.
Oh, I understand that it wouldn't be required, but would it make sense that at least discussions in the preliminary review meeting that a developer would come through to at least explore whether or not, one, there were assets that we would like to see, in other words, county road through the project, where they develop it and we actually, then end up maintaining it, and thus we control its access and those kinds of things, but also create the access we would like to see, or the grid that I keep trying to see our communities use. If that is part of the review process, and this code here allows for that to be addressed, that's where I'm trying to discern. Is it something that allows for it, or would it preclude it? And
It definitely would not preclude it. It would allow for that. And those type of discussions are ones that we might have even before an applicant files their application. But certainly as part of there's certainly nothing in here that precludes that discussion from taking place before or after application. Yeah, so I think.
No, that answers my question. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And I do not see anyone else with a hand raised at this time. So if we could move to the next item.
Yes.
Our last amendment will be presented by Mr. Hisney. And this is still what we're going to do for this amendment is walk through some of the changes and actually really preemption of our ability to regulate home-based businesses in the land development that we currently regulate in the land development code, and some of the significant changes that are coming from that. Our intent with this is to so the state law doesn't to be operable doesn't require that we change the land development code. But if we didn't, it creates a situation where our code ostensibly says certain things, but would not be things that wouldn't accurately reflect what we could and could not require. So this is, I'd say, a conformance amendment to bring our code in concert with state law from a reader standpoint. And I'll ask Mr. Hisney to present the high points of the change in state law that will be reflected in the code.
So commissioners, currently under our code, to have a home-based business, You are required to obtain approval of a conditional use permit, and that's done administratively. Regulations for home-based businesses have a number of standards that restrict the types of home-based businesses that can even be permitted. Also restricts whether you can have employees at the business who don't live at the home, and several other things like that, with the idea that the requirements are set up so that a home-based business operates in a very benign fashion, that people in the neighborhood may not even know there's a business operating there. As Adam mentioned, there is a new state law that went into effect on July 1 and generally preempts local regulation of home-based businesses. So we'll be drafting up an amendment 4 to reflect that state law. Some of the changes, or the key changes, it will eliminate the need for approval of a conditional use zoning permit. We will not be able to require that. It will broadly expand the types of businesses that may operate from residential homes. And then also in residential districts where we currently prohibit employees who don't reside at the home, it will allow for up to 2 non-residential, 2 employees who do not live at the home. The rules that the state has passed has some limitations regarding parking of vehicles, things like that. But generally speaking, the state law would definitely be broader allowance than what our code currently has. Available for any questions.
I just like to say I find this fascinating, and I think it's a real. I mean, I would have, liked to do something like this for Hillsborough County, and especially with I think the pandemic has fast forwarded. We were looking at people more and more, or some people were working from home with certain kinds of jobs, but as we all know, the pandemic did in a big way for many people, had them working at home. And I've seen surveys where employers were less enthusiastic, but some were supportive of 5 days a week, and employees had mixed levels of enthusiasm about it, or as well. Some wanted to be 5 days a week at home. Some wanted to be 5 days a week at a work site. And so it's very interesting, but I think the upshot is that there will be much expansion of at least partial working from home. But I'm also thinking, and I'd like to, I don't know if Mr. Gormley, so just yesterday at our land use meeting, we had, they were applying in Brandon to have a psychologist office with the one psychologist out of what was a single family home, but could have been some kind of mixed use 12. I can't really remember the exact circumstances, but it would seem as though, in terms of this, could he have not even, just moved in and operated a business then, his business that he was asking for?
Commissioner, the difference between what was being requested yesterday and this is that the request yesterday was to have that be a business unto itself. So it wasn't a home-based business. In the home-based business, in our current regulations and in the state statute, it's clear that it's talking about business activities that are secondary to the use of the structure as a residential dwelling. So the health practitioner's office that was on the agenda yesterday did not have any required residential component. It could just be a health practitioner's office. This amendment is dealing with scenarios where you have a residence that somebody's living in, residential zoning district, it could be RSC, just a neighborhood district, but allowing for certain business activities to take place at the home, both under the code and under the new state law. Again, it is tied to being secondary to the uses of residents. and there is language that requires that the structure, when viewed from the street, is consistent with the appearance of residential uses in the neighborhood. That health practitioner's office met that, but it was a little different in that it was not a primary residence with a secondary use. That primary business with a secondary use is something that could have been considered as a home-based business, but that was not what the applicant was pursuing in that case.
Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
And I see Commissioner Overman, you had your hand raised.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. That was good, and I unfortunately have not read the new section, but I see that there's a broad expansion of the type of businesses that we could include. And that list is really important to me. You know, if it does restrict some of the process where we don't have to have a conditional zoning permit, there could be businesses that are currently operating in a commercial location that choose to move to a residential location that is in conflict with, you know, neighborhood issues, churches. You know, basically, if I were running a brothel, I could now have one in my home. You know, not that I would ever go there,
Right.
but just, I mean, as an example of the types of businesses that are allowed to operate, or, you know, because it's a residential home, can I, you know, have a bottle club at that location? Or as we may have heard about and recently, you know, I mean, how do we identify where we have a residence that's causing a problem that we previously have had restrictions if you're a business licensed to do that action or that activity, when it has been moved to a home-based business that's not zoned commercial?
Right. And so,
Require
Commissioner,
those special use permits.
and so, Commissioner, that is something that we're kind of wrestling with right now, how to accommodate that. But the gist of the state law is it basically preempts us from regulating them. I believe there's an exception for hotels that doesn't cover a home-based business hotel, but otherwise, the controls that we're still able to have on the business relate to parking, number of employees, the outward appearance of the structure, things that we already regulate and preclude, such as odors, smoke, noise, vibration that come from the use. But we don't have the ability under state law to say these type of businesses are categorically permitted as home-based business and these are not. What we can do, and this term is a little bit, I think we have a good position on this, but the statute provides that we can't regulate home-based businesses in any kind of way that we would regulate non-home-based businesses. So if a use required a special use permit in the district in which we allow it, we could require a special use permit for that home-based business. So in the process of doing that, you know, for instance, say alcoholic beverage establishment, we have a few bottle clubs in the county, but we no longer permit any new ones. So those are, you know, amortizing themselves out. But alcoholic beverage establishment in a neighborhood, it almost certainly wouldn't meet separation requirements from residentially zoned properties, which puts them into a special use process to request that waiver. Through that, we can still maintain that structure, and it would be the burden of the applicant to show why the reduction of the waiver, why the separation isn't needed. So we can't really get to most actual uses. We can regulate the way that those uses present themselves. And parking was mentioned. It precludes the home-based business from having parking on the right-of-way or on unpaved spots. And it also requires that parking be consistent with what is present in a residential neighborhood. So there are some kind of indirect controls, but as to the actual uses, we're essentially preempted from regulating them the way that we had been.
Okay, and so does that include any zoning associated with whether it's urban or agricultural zoned? I mean, does it go across all of our, land use codes?
The way we're reading the statute, it does. It applies, the preemption applies in areas that are zoned for residential use. So it's residential zoning districts. It's a lot of most of the agricultural zoning districts. So it would apply across all the zoning districts in which residential use is allowed.
Okay, that's why when we were kind of wrestling with yesterday's issue, I thought it would be helpful to get some clarity there. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner, we can't hear you.
Sorry. I see no other questions at this time, and that's our last presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That concludes our presentation and workshop.
Great. We stand adjourned.
All right. Thank you very much.